Hello. Well, it's been the end of a bit of a busy week here, so decided to try and... Oh, hello. Apparently, someone else is glad it's the weekend. Admittedly, I'm working tomorrow, but nevertheless. Now listen, you're going to sit down. Come on. Sit down. One of the problems with this is a larger book. He was able to sit down easily on my knee, but now it doesn't quite work. Come on, down you go. There you go. Can't quite lift this book over the top of him. Okay. Now, you sitting comfortably? Right, let's give that a go. So, The Lost World, Chapter 2. Try your luck with Professor Challenger. I always liked McArdle, the crabbed, old, round-backed, red-headed news editor, and I rather hoped that he liked me. Of course, Beaumont was the real boss, but he lived in the rarefied atmosphere of some Olympian height from which he could distinguish nothing smaller than an international crisis or a split in the cabinet. Sometimes we saw him passing in lonely majesty to his inner sanctum, with his eyes staring vaguely and his mind hovering somewhere over the Balkans or perhaps the Persian Gulf. He was above and beyond us. But McArdle was his first lieutenant, and it was he that we knew. The old man nodded as I entered the room, and he pushed his spectacles far up on his bald forehead. "Well, Mr. Malone, from all I hear, you seem to be doing very well," he said in his light Scottish accent. "What did you want to see me about?" To ask a favour." He looked alarmed and his eyes shunned mine. "Tut, tut. What is it?" "Do you think, sir, you could possibly send me on a mission for the paper? I do my best to put it through and get you some good copy." "What sort of mission did you have in mind, Mr. Malone?" "Well, anything that had adventure and danger in it, and I really would do my very best. The more difficult, the better. That would suit me." "You seem very anxious to lose your life." "To justify my life, sir." "Dear me, Mr. Malone, this is very exalted. I'm afraid the day for this sort of thing is rather past. The expense of the special business hardly justifies the result. And of course, in any case, it would only be an experienced man with a name that could command public confidence who'd get such an order. The big blank spaces on the map are all being filled in, and there's no room for romance anyway." "Wait a bit, though," he added with a sudden smile upon his face. "Talking of blank spaces on the map gives me an idea. What about exposing a fraud, a modern Munchausen, if you will, and making him seem ridiculous? You could show him up to be the liar he is. You could show the truth. Eh, man? Would it be fine? How does that appeal to you?" "Well, anything, anywhere. I care nothing." McArdle was plunged into thought for some minutes. "I wonder whether you could get friendly, or at least on talking terms with the fellow," he said at last. "You seem to have a sort of genius for establishing relations with people. Sympathy, I suppose, or animal magnetism, or youthful vitality, something or other. I'm very conscious of it myself." "You are very good, sir." "So, why don't you try your luck with Professor Challenger of Entmore Park?" I dare say I looked a little startled. "Challenger?" I cried. "Professor Challenger, the famous zoologist? Wasn't he the man that broke the skull of Blundell of the Telegraph?" The news editor smiled grimly. "Do you mind? Didn't you say it was adventures you're after?" It's all by way of business, I suppose, sir," I answered. "Exactly. And I don't suppose he can be so violent as that. I'm thinking Blundell got him at the wrong moment, perhaps, or in the wrong fashion. You may have better luck, or more tact in handling him. There's something in your line there, I'm sure, and the Gazette should make it work." I really know nothing about him," said I, "and I only remember his name in connection with the court proceedings for striking Blundell. I've a few notes for you for guidance, Mr. Malone. I've had an eye on the Professor for some time." He took some paper from the drawer. "Here's a summary of his record. I'll give it to you briefly. Challenger George Edward, born Largs, 1836. Education, Largs Academy, Edinburgh University. British Museum Assistant, 1862. Assistant Keeper of Comparative Anthropology Department, 1863. Resigned after acrimonious correspondence the same year. Winner of the Christen Medal for Zoological Research. Foreign member of, well, quite a lot of things, all about 2 inches, quite small type. Société Belgique, American Academy of Science, La Planta, etc., etc. Ex-British Paleontological Society, Section H, British Association, and so on and so on. Publications, some observations on a series of Calmax skulls, outlines of vertebrate evolution, and numerous papers including the underlying fallacy of Weismannism. That caused quite a heated discussion at the Zoological Conference of Vienna. Recreations, walking, alpine climbing, address Entmore Park, Kensington. There, take it with you. I've nothing more for you tonight. I pocketed the slip of paper. One moment, sir, I said as I realised it was a pink bald head and not a red face which was now confronting me. I'm not very clear yet as to why I'm to interview this gentleman. What's he done? The face flashed back again. Went to South America on a solitary expedition 2 years ago. Came back last year. Had undoubtedly been to South America, but refused to say exactly where. Began to tell his adventures in a vague way, but somebody started picking holes and he just shut up like an oyster. Something wonderful happened, or the man's a champion liar, which is the more probable supposition. Had some damaged photographs, said to be fakes. Got so touchy that he assaults anyone who asks questions, and heaps of reporters doing the stairs. In my opinion, he's a homicidal megalomaniac with a turn for science. That is your man, Mr. Malone. Now, off you run and see what you can make of him. You're big enough to look after yourself. Anyway, you are all safe. Employers' Liability Act, you know. A grinning red face turned once more into a pink oval, fringed with gingery fluff. The interview was at an end. I walked across to the Savage Club, but instead of turning into it, I leaned upon the railings of the Adelphi Terrace and gazed thoughtfully for a long time at the brown, oily river. I can always think more sanely, more clearly in the open air. I took out the list of Professor Challenger's exploits, and as I read it under the electric lamp, then I had what I can only regard as an inspiration. As a pressman, I felt sure from what I'd been told I could never hope to get in touch with this cantankerous professor. But these recriminations, twice mentioned in his skeleton biography, could only mean that he is a fanatic in science. Was there not an exposed margin there upon which he might be accessible? I would try. I entered the club. It was just after 11, and the big room was fairly full, though the rush had not yet set in. I noticed a tall, thin, angular man seated in an armchair by the fire. He turned as I drew my chair up to him. It was the man of all others whom I should have chosen, Tarp Henry, on the staff of nature, a thin, dry, leathery creature who was known to those who knew him as having kindly humanity. I plunged instantly into my subject. What do you know of Professor Challenger? Challenger? He gathered his eyebrows in a scientific disapproval. Challenger is the man who came with some cock and bull story from South America. What story? Oh, it was some rank nonsense about some queer animal he discovered. I believe he's retracted it since. Anyhow, he suppressed it all. Gave an interview to Reuters, and there was such a howl about it that he saw it wouldn't do. It was a discreditable business. There were one or two folk who were inclined to take him seriously, but he soon choked them off. How? Well, by his insufferable rudeness and impossible behaviour. There was poor old Wadley of the Zoological Institute. Wadley sent a message. The president of the Zoological Institute presents his compliments to Professor Challenger, and would take it as a personal favour if he would do them the honour to come to their next meeting. The answer he gave was unprintable. You don't say. Well, a bolderised version of it would run, Professor Challenger presents his compliments to the president of the Zoological Institute, and would take it as a personal favour if he would go to the devil. My word! Yes, I expect that's exactly what old Wadley said. I remember his wail at the meeting. It began something like, "In 50 years of experience, of scientific intercourse." It quite broke the old man up. Anything more about Challenger? Well, I'm a bacteriologist, you know. I live in a 900 diameter microscope. I can hardly claim to take a serious notice of anything I see with the naked eye. I'm a frontiersman from the extreme edge of the knowable. I'm feeling quite out of place when I leave my study and come into touch with all you great, rough, hulking creatures. I'm too detached to talk scandal, and yet at scientific conversations I have heard something of Challenger, for he is one of those men nobody can ignore. He's as clever as they make him, a full-charge battery of force and vitality, but quarrelsome, an ill-conditioned faddist, and unscrupulous at that. He'd gone to some length faking some photographs over a South American business. You say he was a fadist? What was his particular fad? Well, he had 1,000, but his latest was something about Wiseman and evolution. Had a fearful row about it in Vienna, I believe. Can you tell me the point? Not at the moment, but a translation of the proceedings exists. We have it filed at the office. Would you care to come? That's just what I want. I have to interview the fellow, and I could really do with a lead-up on him. It's awfully good of you to give me a lift. I'll go with you now if it's not too late. Half an hour later, I was seated in the newspaper office with a huge tome in front of me, which had been opened at the article Wiseman versus Darwin, with the subheading Spirited Protests at Vienna, Lively Proceedings. My scientific education, having been somewhat neglected, was unable to follow the argument, but it was evident that this English professor had handled his subject in a very aggressive fashion and had thoroughly annoyed his continental colleagues. Protests, uproar, and general appeal to the chairman were three of the first brackets which caught my eye. Most of the matter might have been written in Chinese for any definite meaning it conveyed to my brain. "I wish you could translate it into English for me," I said pathetically to my helpmate. "Well, it is a translation." "Then I'd better try my luck with the original." "It certainly is rather deep for a layman." If I could only get a single good meaty sentence which seemed to convey some definite human idea, that would really serve my turn. Yes, this one will do. It seems vague, but I almost understand it. I'll copy it out. This should be my link with the terrible professor. "Nothing else I can do?" "Well, I suppose I could write to him. I could frame it on a letter from here and use your address. It could give atmosphere." "We'll have the fellow round here making a row and breaking the furniture." No. You'll see the letter. Nothing contentious, I assure you." "Well, there's my desk and my chair. You'll find paper there. I'd like to censor it before it goes." It took some doing, but I flatter myself that it wasn't such a bad job when it was finished. I read it aloud with a critical bacteriologist and had some pride in my handiwork. "Dear Professor Challenger," it said, "as a humble student of nature, I have always taken the most profound interest in your speculation as to the differences between Darwin and Wiseman. I have recently had the occasion to refresh my memory by reading—" "You infernal liar," mumbled Tarp Henry. "By rereading your masterly address at Vienna. That lucid and admirable statement seems to be the last word in the matter. There is one sentence in it, however, namely, 'I protest strongly against the insufferable and entirely dogmatic assertion that each separate id is a microcosm possessed of historical architecture elaborated slowly through a series of generations.' Have you no desire, in the view of later research, to modify that statement? Do you not think it is over-accentuated? With your permission, I would ask the favour of an interview, as I feel strongly on the subject and have certain suggestions that I could only elaborate in a personal conversation. With your consent, I trust I have the honour of calling at 11 o'clock the day after tomorrow, Wednesday. I remain, sir, with assurances of profound respect, yours very truly, Edward D. Malone." "How's that?" I asked triumphantly. "Well, if your conscience can stand it. Well, it's never failed me yet. What do you mean to do? To get there, once I'm in his room, I may see some opening. I may even go to the length of an open confession. If he's a sportsman, he'll be tickled. Tickled indeed. He's more likely to do the tickling. Chainmail or American football suit, that's what you want. Well, goodbye. I'll have to answer for you here on Wednesday morning, if he ever deigns to answer you. He is a violent, dangerous, cantankerous character, hated by everyone who comes across him, and the butt of the students, so far as they dare to take liberty with him. Perhaps it would be best for you if you'd never heard from the fellow. End of chapter 2. Well, I don't know about you guys, but this is a much better read for me, certainly, than Three Men in a Boat. I love Conan Doyle's way of describing his characters. Hopefully you guys are going to get a similar benefit from this as I will. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe, hit the like button, and you'll get a notification when I publish the next version of this or any of the further medical talks. Okay, with that, take care. Don't run off.